What's up, everybody? Michael here. It's been nearly a decade since the most infamous restaurant review of all time. It included classic zingers like how the blue watermelon margarita tastes like some combination of radiator fluid and formaldehyde. And the one that asks, why is one of the few things on your menu that can be eaten without fear or regret called a roasted pork banh mi when it resembles that item about as much as you resemble Emily Dickinson? The review in question eviscerated Guy's American Kitchen and Bar, owned by Guy Fieiri. The review/assassination attempt was penned by New York Times restaurant critic Pete Wells. When it came out in 2012, Fieri had already been a Food Network star for 6 years, with several seasons of Guy's Big Bite and diners, drive-ins, and dives under his belt. He also owned 4 successful restaurants. Today, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives is in its 35th season.
That's a great wing.
Guy's Grocery Games has enjoyed almost 30 seasons, and Fieri's face has graced scores of other Food Network shows. And there are plenty of Fieri haters out there, writing him off as all bombast and, in Wells' words, a representation of going insane. And don't forget the time Anthony Bourdain wondered, how does Guy Fieri de-douche? But despite the haters, Fieri's star continues to shine brighter than a kitchen grease fire. Is this guy just the result of what happens when a can of Red Bull and a jar of hot sauce make a baby? Can this guy, yes, this guy, actually teach us a lot about the cultural function of food? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition, Guy Fieri, Deep or Dumb. It's no secret that Guy Fieri is a busy dude. And as the title of his flagship show, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives suggests, Fieri is a champion of food that's generally considered lowbrow.
It is seriously too legit to quit, though.
And because he is genuinely psyched to eat a jalapeno pepper popper sandwich made by an unknown chef, it's easy for critics to write him off as a bombastic goofball. That puts him in stark contrast with his fellow Food Network stars, who posture as serious chefs or bastions of fine dining, like the casual culinary queen of East Hampton, Ina Garten, or the ginger master of the restaurant kitchen, Mr. Robert William Flay. But Fieri is a longtime restaurateur in his own right, and his recipes have a consistent ethos, firmly rooted in a lack of concern over traditional food preparations and a passion for inventive culinary fusion. Aside from showing you the Fieri tattoo over my heart, it is difficult to overstate what a singular presence he is in the celebrity chef landscape. But to truly understand the taste of Flavortown, it's important to assess him in the context of our national history of celebrity chefs. America wasn't always obsessed with watching people cook outrageous things on TV. In fact, the act of eating in mainstream post-World War II America was all about convenience and economy, unless you were lucky enough to have a bomb-ass Italian nonna to serve you up some rigatoni. As French chef Jacques Pepin described in his memoir, in America, food was sustenance, full stop. That meant lots of cheap, highly processed eats. But the arrival of French cooking in mainstream America would conjure a new cultural preoccupation with things like food quality, freshness, and seasonality. The first big American celebrity chef was Julia Child, who brought her training at Le Cordon Bleu back home to teach her audience that French dishes tasted better than cream of mushroom soup-based casseroles. Her act was revelatory, showing that fancy cooking techniques like mincing a mirepoix or deboning a duck weren't just for the professionals. Also, she invented shark repellent for the Navy. Seriously, Google it. After her show, The French Chef, debuted in 1963, public appetite for food TV mushroomed. And from the mid-80s to the mid-90s, foodie culture became a mainstay of American life, coinciding with the Reagan era and the yuppie boom. This eventually led to the creation of the Food Network. Founded in 1993, it boasted hosts like Emeril Lagasse, Jacques Pepin, and Robin Leach. And by the time the channel was popular enough to host the next Food Network star, its stable of celebrity chefs represented something very specific. Sure, they each had their own personality, and areas of expertise, but they were unified in a vibe that dominates the network and celebrity chef culture to this day. They were seasoned, experienced, and focused on elevating the dishes they were making. Sometimes that means staying loyal to the traditional preparation methods of a dish. Sometimes it means adding an unexpected fancy twist.
I'd like to take something really traditional and do it with a twist. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to take the croutons and put it on the outside?
Or, as spectacular Foodscapes authors Josie Johnson and Michael Goodman would put it, food media frames and mediates what Foodscapes could and should be, how they could and should operate, and for whom they could and should work. They communicate specific food instructions via recipes, but they also project powerful images of what constitutes a good meal, a worthy home cook, and a celebrated chef. That is to say, food influencers set the bar for home cooking, and the rest of us, just try to capture their vibes. In this context of good meals and celebrated chefs, it's no wonder that the discourse around Guy Fieri has remained spicy. We live in a culture that assigns moral value to food. As a result, good food can mean anything from healthy to fancy to healthy fancy. And this is where Fieri breaks the Jell-O mold. The majority of the food he showcases is neither low in cholesterol or high in its opinion of itself. Truffle oil is supplanted by donkey sauce. And we think that's a crucial part of his appeal. His only criteria for a good meal are if it tastes,
Oh, that's ridiculous.
and of course, as far as that celebrated chef thing goes, we have that infamous review, among many others, to cast aspersion upon his credentials. But the discourse around Fieri doesn't stop there. Scholar Emily Conchois noted in her book, Diners, Dudes, and Diets, that as of spring 2020, the food site Eater had published more features about Fieri than any other big-name chef, be it Anthony Bourdain, David Chang, or anybody else. And these posts generated more than twice as many comments than any other chefs. So why the disparity? We think it comes down to the cultural context Guy Fieri is operating within. It's all fun and Guy's grocery games for the hoi polloi who think Fieri is a cool, down-to-earth dude they'd like to get a beer with. But that's precisely why it's so easy for critics to dunk on him. He's easily defined as part of what scholar Dwight MacDonald would call the mass culture, or its more sinister moniker, mass cult. That's essentially a commercialized and totally artificial culture popularized by the mass media. Mass cult exists in opposition to what MacDonald calls high culture, which he characterizes as more of the formal things you'll learn about in school, like Shakespeare or the viola. In the case of food, that means high culture is culinary school, whereas mass cult is home cooking or picking up skills in a diner kitchen. And while both the mass cult and high culture can be wildly popular among the greater public, MacDonald argued, way back in 1960, in the United States, the demands of the audience, which has changed from a small body of connoisseurs into a large body of ignoramuses, have become the chief criteria of success. This was an exceedingly rude way of saying that taste had been democratized, and thus was driven by the consumer demands of the masses. That's how McDonald's, the restaurant, not the scholar, has managed to serve hundreds of billions of Big Macs without serving a McRatatouille even once. And when applying this framework to television food celebrity culture, it explains why the Food Network airs so many hours of Fieri content. He is exactly what the spectator wants. In other words, Fieri has some big, let people like what they like energy. However, the irony is that while Guy Fieri himself might be a product of mass cult, he spends many of his on-screen hours highlighting restaurants owned not by millionaire celebrity chefs or backed by groups of financiers, but independent local spots owned by families and food-obsessed non-celebrities. The implicit message seems to be, even in parts of the country dominated by chain restaurants and big box stores, there are still amazing, unique meals to be had if you're willing to find them. Yet, despite being an easy target, Guy Fieri staunchly refuses to be anything other than what he is, someone who loves food, his family, and the unassuming mom and pop joints that to him are quintessentially American. And when he tries their signature dishes, whether it's a traditional take on a club sandwich or a modern update on ramen, he's not trying to change them or upgrade their fanciness or make them ready for a photo shoot. He takes them exactly as they are and champions their specific flavors and often their unique flavor profiles. And while there are plenty of classic chili dogs and homemade Twinkies to be had on Triple D, it's, in a lot of ways, remarkably inclusive. As far as the show is concerned, any food made in America is quintessentially American, especially when those cuisines originated from other countries.
Greek favorites like hand-rolled beef and rice-filled grape leaves.
In recent years, you're more likely to see an interesting take on Vietnamese, Korean, or Mexican food on Triple D than you are a new iteration of wings or burgers.
A Greek family making tacos in Texas.
And bonus points for foods that are mashups of different cultures, like pastrami tacos or duck confit enchiladas. That's a situation that Fieri loves to describe as
Ridiculous. Ridiculously good.
Fieri's staked his brand on an attitude of, I'm no better than you, we just all love food. Food is the greatest common denominator.
Look at that meat. Tender, flaky, pull-aparty, super hotty, smoldery, burny mouthy.
This is a crucial difference between him and most other food celebrities. On Triple D, his expertise is held in reserve. He doesn't make the rules, and he's not here to correct anyone. And while we might not think of Fieri as overtly philosophical, his sensibility towards food culture shares something with Scottish philosopher and legendary Edinburgh bar patron David Hume, who said, "Indulge your passion for science, but let your science be human, and such as may have a direct reference to action in society. Be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy, be still a man." For Hume, this meant that deep and speculative thought was important, but so was experiencing life, being social, and having fun. For him, philosophy was never meant to be at the expense of relating to everyday life, and more bluntly, being a good hang. And part of the reason Fieri's approach works is because he never gets distracted by the more conceptual and intellectual aspects of modern food culture. He's mostly there to chill and chow down. Fieri's version of Hume's quote might be a chef, but not at the expense of being a down-to-earth dude. Sure, while he's there, he talks about these supposedly lowbrow foods in a highbrow way, and he makes it clear he knows his way around a kitchen without acting like he owns the place. And it's precisely this approach that puts his culinary skills somewhat in the background, so the viewer can fully revel in the sensory experience of eating a falafel waffle with him. Fieri's restaurant experience doesn't distract from the joy of eating. He doesn't roll into these smaller businesses to throw his ego around, unlike another chef we know.
Holy rubber, tasteless, that's going straight to the trash.
And he's even hella humble.
It's a great place. You got great people. This is the real diner feel, so congratulations.
While he might get a lot of flack for his own brand, most of what he's done on Triple D is give a massive amount of promotion to local spots he really believes in. As far as Fieri is concerned, everyone he meets is an expert when it comes to making their signature dishes, and he has to show deference to their recipes because Fieri himself has built a reputation on creating his own unconventional menu items. He's not a pretentious culinary scold. He picked up most of his skills working in actual restaurants. He's positioned as a self-made man, and this bolsters his public appeal because Americans love a bootstrapping narrative. All of these factors combined make us wonder if Guy Fieri is the living, breathing embodiment of the ideal American. Indeed, Fieri's devotion to welcoming foods of all kinds into his show's vision of America suggests that he may be our true populist king. As cook and author Julia Turshen wrote for Lucky Peach, when it comes to visibility and inclusiveness, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives succeeds. Food allows the show to highlight inclusivity without being about inclusivity. And yet, for segments of American culture that would still call Indian food exotic, Fieri appeals nonetheless. As Julia Moskin wrote in the New York Times, he has a Sarah Palin-like ability to reach Americans who feel left behind by the nation's cultural, or in his case, culinary elite. Except, of course, Fieri has never claimed the ability to see a foreign nation from outside of his Northern California home. If most American celebrity chefs teach people how to cook elevated food by, say, adding French techniques, Fieri seeks to celebrate the American food that chefs are already cooking. Now, Fieri famously keeps mum about his political opinions, though he'll do arguably political acts like fundraising nearly $25 million on behalf of unemployed restaurant workers, or cooking meals for volunteers fighting California wildfires. As Matt Shimkowitz put it in the AV Club, whether you read his actions as philanthropic or socialist or the end of food culture as we know it, Guy fits the bill. He shows up, puts on a show, and leaves it to his audience to define who he is to them. And indeed, Fieri's able to cash in on his keen insight into the broader American psyche by being everything and anything to everyone and anyone, regardless of background, political affiliation, or access to flame-printed shirts. There's plenty of problems with America, but ultimately Fieri represents all the best parts of what the country claims to value: inclusivity, joy, and on fire, out of bounds, kickin' gangster bomb flavor morsels. And that, in our opinion, is actually kinda surprisingly, we can't believe we're about to say this, deep.
You hear what I'm saying?
But what do you guys think? Is Guy Fieri the ultimate embodiment of American ideals, or is he just a burger-loving dude who single-handedly kept the hair bleach industry afloat? Let us know in the comments. Hit the subscribe button like you're throwing too much sauce on the meat, and don't forget to ring that bell. Thanks to our patrons for all your support, and be sure to check out our new exclusive perks on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching. Later.